It's been 1 year of the worst terror attack in Israel, the 7th of October 2023. And with me is Dean Elsden. Dean Elsden is the international spokesperson for the Israel police. Dean, I'd met you at the Rhyme Film Festival last year. We're meeting once again. But 1 year down the line, in that worst terror attack, 59 brave police personnel were killed. What is it that they were able to prevent? You're commemorating 1 year of their supreme sacrifice.
You said 1 year, but to me it feels like a lifetime. I'm sure the same for you. The beginning days were chaos. The Israel police that day on October 7th were the bulletproof vest of our nation. They ran out to the front lines. They didn't wait for any instructions from anybody. They knew there were civilians that needed assistance, and they ran to them. Not them with bulletproof vests, them not even with long guns. They had their handguns, and they were fighting terrorists who had AK-47s and RPGs. And when you're going up against such a danger, there's no other word than bravery that comes to mind of these heroes. And although 59 fell on that first day, we've already reached the number 67 since last October 7th. Whether it's in Hebron, whether it's in Jerusalem, whether it's in Jenin, all these different areas, whether it's Arnon Zamora, who was part of the rescue team mission that went inside of Gaza to recover Noah Al-Gamani and 3 others. These are our heroes, and this is what today was all about. To recognize them, to appreciate them, the work that they did on October 7th, the work before, and the work that's still going on right now. Today, while we commemorate this event, it's not the end of the war, whereas we still don't know how much more is to come. We have hostages waiting to come home. We have residents up north that are away from their homes. We're going to do everything possible to be here for our civilians. But today, I was so appreciative that you came, that other members of the media were able to come and hear the stories and the voices of these officers and their families.
Not many people know in India or perhaps even worldwide that day on the 7th of October when the first Hamas terrorists came, and I'll in a moment ask him about the numbers who came in, you had police personnel with their pistols and their revolvers taking on terrorists who came with RPGs. So it was pistols, maybe 1 clip or 2 clips versus RPGs. How many terrorists came in? What kind of weapons did they have? 1 year down the line, what kind of evidence have you been able to gather?
So we knew that it was an extensive arsenal on that very first day, but nobody would have imagined the level of weaponry that the terrorists infiltrated Israel with. We're talking about over 3,000 terrorists. We're talking about pickup trucks that had heavy machine guns mounted onto the back of the pickup truck. We're talking about RPGs and snipers and claymore mines and explosives. We're talking about not just the attack itself, where the police officers were battling the terrorists and they were using this weaponry, but even afterwards, where they desecrated the bodies and they would put booby traps of explosives underneath the body, so when the first responders would come, maybe they didn't kill somebody all the way. They left them a little bit of alive, or they left them in plain sight so the first responders could see. They would come, take the body, and it would take the life of the first responder with them. We saw that also in the Shul Identification Center, where the Israel police was identifying the civilians coming in the truckloads. And the police officers would go, they would try to identify this victim, they would find a grenade inside of the body. We're talking about things that the normal human mind can't comprehend. That's what took place on October 7th. We're still hearing more stories. These are things that people, even till this day, can't speak of themselves, the people that went through it, because of the trauma, because of the level of disgust. It's not even mentioning the sexual assault that was taking place, where we have witnesses who said they saw it, they were watching it. These are all things that are now being gathered by the Israel police as part of the investigation. And while the IDF is working very hard inside of Gaza to make sure that we dismantle the Hamas infrastructure, to make sure that we can bring our hostages home who are being held captive by these brutal terrorists, the Israel police is going to continue doing everything possible for the national mission, to bring these terrorists to justice, to bring our loved ones home, and to restore order in the north and bring our loved ones back to their houses.
So are you telling me 3,000 Hamas terrorists they infiltrated?
More than 3,000 terrorists. More than 3,000 terrorists. And it sounds like just a number, and I'm saying it is 3,000. Can you imagine what 3,000 terrorists means? With heavy armed machine guns, with RPGs, with all these different types of weapons going through communities. It's not a battle of an army versus an army. This is a terrorist that was going and looking for civilians to target, and luckily we had brave men and women, Israel police, IDF, security forces from all over coming and rushing to interdict this threat. That represents the Israeli nation. And when I say Israeli nation, it doesn't mean Jews, It doesn't mean just Israelis. There were multiple people that were kidnapped from multiple different nations. We're talking about the Hamas terrorists murdering Muslims, murdering Christians, murdering anybody who they saw. And that's what took place on October 7th. That's what the world really needs to realize and see, that this is not Jews versus Palestinians or Israel versus Palestine or Gaza. This is Israel and a nation, good versus evil, Israel versus terrorist infrastructure. Because today it happened here, we're already starting to see it in different countries abroad.
In fact, India has been a victim of this radical Islamist terror. We just had 10, not just, but even 10 for horrible for us in our country. 10 armed terrorists had attacked India in Mumbai during 26/11. They massacred 166 people, and that shook our nation to the core. Here, you had 3,000 plus terrorists who massacred 1,200. God forbid, I mean, had the police not been there, what would have happened had those first responders not been there?
At 7 o'clock, earlier than 7 o'clock, even a few minutes before 7, the Israel Southern District Commander gave a call over the radio called Palash Paleshet. This is a call that all of our officers know that shut down a district. We go to man different checkpoints and we stand ready. And that's what our police officers did that day before 7 a.m. Had the Israel police not done that, the terrorists would have made their way to Tel Aviv, they would have made their way to Jerusalem, they would have swarmed the entire country.
And that was the aim.
That was their goal, of course, to terrorize, to murder as many as possible. But I didn't say that the Israel police were a bulletproof vest of our nation for no reason. It was because of them that these terrorists didn't kill thousands, tens of thousands, and gone until who knows how long.
So these terrorists had planned with their pickup trucks, with their machine guns, with their replenishments to come all the way to Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and not just stop in Sderot and Eshkelon and Kfar Aza and Oz, Nehal Oz.
Throughout, their goal was to go throughout the country, to wreak as much havoc as possible. It didn't matter if they were going to die doing it. That's the difference. You know, they grow up on this extreme ideology, this propaganda, this radicalism. This is a threat that we're seeing all across the world. Yes? They took this opportunity, and we see that it's not just that they hate Jews, they hate Israelis, they came after all of us. Think about their own people. They knew that Israel was going to respond. And they put millions and millions of dollars into their terror infrastructure, millions of dollars into their tunnels, millions of dollars into all these different things. But what did they do for their civilians? They don't care. They're using them as human shields. They're shooting the rockets from residential communities, knowing that the IDF is going to target that terror infrastructure. And the IDF puts leaflets out, voice notes, messages, doing whatever possible. The most humane army in the world. I haven't heard of any other country alerting the neighborhood that they're going to target because there's terrorists operating out of there.
There's a point that you raised, and I wanted, if you have a minute, some clarity on that. You said cryptocurrency funded Hamas terrorists. Can you elaborate that for a moment, please?
I don't want to get too in-depth because it's still an ongoing investigation. Our investigators are still working very hard in their techniques, but I can tell you that millions of dollars from abroad have been seized that are part of a terror infrastructure Hamas using to fund their terrorism and their terrorist activities, and it's something that we're continuously doing. Not just the cryptocurrency, we're also targeting Iran, the head of this octopus of proxy of terror, the axis of evil. They're trying to reach Israelis inside of Israel and trying to manipulate them into committing attacks, into assisting them with information to harm our security. The Israel police is also arresting those people who are involved, whether knowingly or not knowingly. We have an eye on these, and we're doing everything possible, things that the public don't even know, to defend our civilians.
And is that Iran trying subversion within your country one of the major threats that Israel police is tackling right now?
The Israel police is tackling threats on many fronts. We're talking about the front of terror. In terror, you have attacks from Lone Wolf, attacks from different terror organizations, attacks from undocumented workers that are coming into Israel. We have to secure our borders, and that's exactly what we're doing. Attacks from different nations, whether it's from Lebanon or, like I said, Iran, who's trying to manipulate people who live in here, like places like Beit Shemesh. We have an eye on all of this. We're going to keep defending our people. October 7th, our nation took a hit. There's no doubt. I'm not going to give criticism under fluorescent lighting, but I'm also not going to lie and say, that it wasn't a huge hit to us. We had civilians who died, our friends, our families. But since October 7th, we've wiped the dust off. We're strong. We're a resilient nation. That's the nation of Israel. For generations, people have tried to persecute us, to kill us, and we stood strong. And we thank India, we thank the United States, we thank all the nations who know that this is not a political war. This is not a war of religion. This is a war of good versus evil. And standing with Israel is standing with humanity.
Dean, for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks and wish you all the best in your war on terror.
Thank you.
So that's what this country is battling at this point of time. As they commemorate the braves who fell on the 7th of October, there are massive challenges and a war ahead that the country still faces. Gaurav Sawant in Jerusalem, Israel, for India Today.